welcome back. So, anyway, to the Turford channel. There, I had to get in there. All right, today's video is on how to finish the Power Lab, where we find out who has the most power in the class. In order to do this lab is actually pretty easy. The first thing we did was we went outside and we measured, actually I'll be honest, we only measured one bleacher, and then what we did was we just multiplied by how many bleachers then that we ran up. And so what happened after that? We measured the bleachers, we got this total height. For our lab, we ran up a total height of 3.17 meters. Before we went out, we had each person call out my name. For example, I would be Turdferg, 67. And I called out my weight in newtons. Now, if you don't know how to get your weight in newtons, take your weight in pounds. For me, is 219 pounds. Hey, don't say nothing. I know. I've been eating good. And you times by 4.448, which actually gave me a weight of, let's see if we can figure this out real quick, 219 times 4.448 gave me a weight of 974 graceful newtons. So there is my weight. And so what we're going to do is use that weight for our force running at the bleachers. So then all we did was have somebody else stand at the very top with a stopwatch. And then they called out the time. For me, it was like blazing fast, 1.2 seconds, something like that. Okay, maybe I'm exaggerating. But anyway, that was all we had to do the power in the lab. So let's go immediately to the data table and start figuring out a few things in here. So here is the data table from one of the classes that I did up here. And hey, there's me up at the top, Mr. No. This is Turdfergavision. So we need to make sure and there. Turdferg. All right. So there we go. The illustrious Turdferg, 6'7", running up the bleachers. So how much power do I have? Well, you would need to do a sample calculation page. Let's get a sample calculation page out of. So sample calculations, I just misspelled the word sample. That's not even a letter. But anyway, sample calculations. And of course, I will put my name and my date in the top right-hand corner. Matter of fact, while I'm thinking about it, I'll go back a page, and if I haven't done it on this page, I will put my name and date on there because it would be a shame to lose 2 points for that reason. But anyway, my sample calculations. First one I'm going to do, to find work is nothing but force times distance. For me, the force had to at least be my weight, and I ran 3.17 meters, which means, for me, let's get the calculator back out, 974 times 3.17 means the work that I did in running up those bleachers, 3,088 joules of work running up those bleachers. So now I'll go back to my data table, and I will fill that in, 3,088. So all I'm going to do is do force times distance, or in this case, weight times distance for this whole entire column. Because the reality is, we all ran the same distance in the lab, but the heavier you are, the more work you did. For example, here's a boy that outweighed me by, 4 newtons looks like. So he'll actually have done more work than me while running up the bleachers. And a lot of other people did less work. But the title of the lab is not the work lab. The title of the lab is the power lab. So how do we calculate the power of something? Well, power is actually how fast you do your work, or the rate that you do your work. So in my case, I did 3,088 joules of work, and it only took me 1.80 seconds to do that. So if I want to know how much power I had, where is my trusty calculadora? There it is. 3,088 divided by 1.8 means I did 1,000, I'm going to round it off, 1,716 watts of work. And yes, that is watts, just like you see on a light bulb written out. So let's go back one now. So I had 1,000, what incredible short-term memory. I've already forgot what that calculator said. 1,716. 1,716 watts. But if you notice, there's still one more column, and that's how to get horsepower. Well, that's going to be pretty easy. To get my horsepower, let's go back to this sample calculation page again. Getting horsepower is just as easy as dividing by this. There's 746 watts per horsepower. So for me, My horsepower, 1.7, and most Americans are more familiar with horsepower than watts anyway. 746 equals 2.30 horsepower. So there is my horsepower in the lab. So these calculations are actually pretty easy at that rate. So 2.30 horsepower. So all you're going to do is multiply equals, then you're going to divide by the time, and then the very last thing you're going to do after you is divide by, I cannot make the number, divide by 746, and that will get your answer into horsepower. So hopefully you're all ready to hear, but here I'll walk through one more. Let's look at who's next on the list. Brad is this person's name. Brad, 742 times 3.17 means Brad did 2,352 joules of work because he's a lot smaller than me. He didn't do as much work as I did. Divided by 1.76 means he had a power of 1336. So you'd go 1336, and then you'd come back and divide by 746, and that's going to get you 1.79, and there would be his horsepower. So this lab, what do we need? Well, sample calculations finished. We need a title to a report, and I'm just going to do a little roughing on this. A name and date, of course. Now, the purpose of the lab, you can pretty much copy me. Actually, I'm going to give you some choice on the purpose. I'll give you a hint. Whatever you write for a purpose, it should have something about power in the purpose. I'm going to leave you some leeway. I'm going to say you could have to find out, the purpose of this lab is to find out who had the most power. You might even come back and say to find my power. In other words, academic freedom. Academic freedom. In other words, you write your own purpose. You don't have to regurgitate my purpose. Write the purpose in the lab. All I'm saying is it better have something to find out which girl had the most power in the class, which boy, to find out if Mr. Cold is not as old as he really looks by kicking the tail of everybody that's younger than him in the class. Ha ha ha. And if so, your conclusion would be, when you get to the very end, is Mr. Cole still a beast? Today, I learned Mr. Cole, aka Turdford, is still a beast. Okay, maybe that's not the way to go. But anyway, the moral of the story is whatever you write for a purpose, your conclusion should do what? Answer that purpose. So if your purpose was to say, if Abigail's was to say, the purpose of this lab was today was to find out how much power I had, then Abigail's conclusion would say, today I found out that I have a power of 1.2 maybe? No, even 1. And yes, I'm not talking to myself. There's actually people here. But anyway, you answer whatever you write for a purpose. Materials for the lab. You should know what materials we use for the lab. You know what we did. We needed students. We needed steps. We just needed a hill, something to do what? To run up. We needed something to measure how high we ran up with, and we needed something to time that with. So you should be able to come up with a materials list. What about procedures when you get ready to write them? What would you end up having for procedures? I kind of went over at the beginning of the video. You need to measure how high. First thing you're probably going to do is say something about measuring how high you ran up. And then pretty much after that, what did we do? Get a student to run up the stairs, time them, and repeat for all the other students. So I'll be honest, I don't think you're going to have three procedures for this whole lab. It should be kind of easy. We already went through the conclusion. We went through the conclusion. And again, answer your purpose. So whatever you're writing for your purpose, just make sure your conclusion answers that. Again, if your purpose was to see if your teacher still has more power than everybody else, then say yes or no, did he? Is it to find out which member of your class has the most power? Then you're going to say in a conclusion who had the most power. That's all I'm getting home. Source of error. And please don't write SOE on your reports. Write the word source of error out. You should be able to figure out something that would cause some error in this lab. I'll be honest. We should have probably had two people running a stopwatch at the top and had more accurate results. Would have been, probably a little bit better. We could have said bees were chasing me. I don't know how to type that, but anyway. So there were a large number of winged yellow jackets. That's not a. That's. Ah. All right, and there's its big stingy. Yeah, I'm a yellow jacket. Or that's hideous. Shh. So anyway, that appears to be my source of error. When you get ready to turn this lab in, you should have a report, a sketch, a sketch. What do you mean by sketch from a sculpt? Draw a set of bleachers. And a student. This should not be your hardest sketch ever, but do make sure and label bleachers. Student. Yeah, not going to be much of a sketch. Data, sample, calculations. That should be your order. So anyway, peace out and Feliz Navidad to you and you and you.